Welcome to Disruptive Capitalists, the show where purpose-driven entrepreneurs and bold investors share how they're reshaping the world by investing time and money in a way that improves lives and creates wealth. So let's get to it. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for another great episode of Disruptive Capitalist Podcast, where we talk about how to make money in the world, but make a difference at the same time. And my guest today is DJ Van Keuren, who's the co-founder of Evergreen Property Partners. He's also the president of the Harvard Real Estate Alumni Association and the founder of the Family Office Real Estate Institute. He is a Harvard-trained strategist with additional studies. He's done a ton of different things, but today we're going to talk about family offices. We're going to talk about real estate and a little bit about what you're doing around the world, DJ. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Sam.
So somebody hears a background like that and they think, okay, DJ's out of my league or he's in a different planet or whatever. How did you get to where you are today? And then tell us a little bit about where you're going.
You know, it comes back to, I don't know if you've ever seen it or if anybody's seen it before, when the founder of Apple spoke at the Stanford event. He gave a commencement speech and he basically said, you don't realize where you're going until you look back and you connect all the dots, right?
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. I mean, after I got out of undergrad, I was a financial advisor, and then I sold that, moved to Vietnam, where I co-developed a coffee company. And after being there for about 3 years, we were looking to come back to the States. And I literally said, what do I want to do? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I've always loved real estate. So I literally started reading everything from the late night gurus, if you remember some of those, when you turn on the TV and they say stuff. I read all of stage. Yeah. And I just kept reading everything. And and it just came full circle. And, then after Cambridge, it took me down to New York City, where I was doing some work with the institutions, and then moved out to Denver about 12 years ago and literally fell into the family office space. And real estate's always been my passion. And then probably about 8 years ago, I realized that what I wanted to do, which was family offices and real estate. And so, and a lot of that is because it's fascinating to hear the stories of the different families, how they created the wealth, but also what they go through, the things they deal with. I mean, we all have issues at some point in time with a family member, whether it's your significant other, your spouse, your sister, your brother, your cousin, your parents, whatever the case, something's going to come up. Well, now start adding multiple zeros to that, right? And then it just expands even more. And so it's just sort of been an evolution. And ironically, I use some of my advisory skills from, back in the 90s to where the real estate skills have just been continued to accumulate. And, going forward is to continue to, build out. We've got a structure that we've created just for, future generations. And so focusing on that and just building two of the businesses, that Evergreen and the Institute. And as long as I'm having fun, I'll just keep building as much as I can.
I love it. I'm a builder, a creator. I will never stop until I'm dead. I don't think there's no such thing as retirement. If it's something you love doing, I've always loved it. I always will, I suspect. And so building, creating is a passion, perhaps an addiction, if you want to call it that. But I love it. Like it's, we need more creators and builders in the world who just constantly looking for a way to improve. Now, this next generation of family office is a concern and a big question mark for a lot of folks. Can you explain what the concern is, and if there is one, and what does that mean? What are you talking about?
Well, I'll tell you what. So the estimated amount of wealth, and our definition of a family office, is worth $250 million or more.
Mhm.
And, if you look back a number of years, the total wealth was probably about 12 trillion. And over the next 10 to 30 years, that's going to grow to over 100. I mean, it's a significant amount of wealth, and that's going to be transferring, from one gen to the future gens. Now, what's interesting is that historically, and these are rough numbers, but 70% of wealth is lost by the second generation and 90% by the third generation. So a lot of that wealth is probably going to be lost. And I've actually seen it myself where somebody even walked in and said, I lost 80% of my family's wealth. And an hour later, I had to ask, how'd you do that? Or how much was it? And he was like, 800 million. I mean, it's real and it happens. But I'll tell you what's interesting with future gens is that if you go to a patriarch or matriarch who created the wealth and you said, okay, you can get an 18% return and save the world, or you can save the world first and get a 13% return, that patriarch will say, give me the 18. The younger gens are like, oh, let's save the world. Yeah. And so there's a totally different viewpoint for that. And so it's really the younger gen that's really driving, what to do, how to improve things, how to make things better as a whole. Mm-hmm. And so that's really where they're coming up. The question is will they be prepared and will they be ready for it? Because unless you have a way to transfer the even the belief system of the family down the line, it just gets convoluted. And it starts going, they're like, give me my own money, I'll do what I want to. And they never made it. So it's hard for them to keep it.
Yeah, I've always considered those who've been able to keep it very wise. Whoever set up the systems to keep those funds forever, they were wise and they're able to teach their children. But today's newest generation is so completely different than the generations before them in terms of what am I willing to do for money or what am I willing to do? Some good, like you said, a far more focus on social impact. We built our company on social impact. How do you make a difference in the world, but actually make money in the process? Because, spending a decade in global health and traveling the world, I just seen all these nonprofits dump all this money, just kind of goes away. But how do you do that and then create an economy where people can thrive and grow and don't need you anymore, right?
Yeah.
And that's a very, very difficult thing to do. And I would never want to replace nonprofits. They have their place and their role in society, and we need them. But we also need a different layer that's focused on creating that wealth. And so you mentioned, this newer generations, they're more focused on saving the world first. What do you guys do with that new generation? How do you, maybe not train is the right word, but how do you help and advise them to still preserve family wealth, grow that family wealth, and go fulfill the missions that they have?
One of the first things is that if you can get to, it really starts from top down. So if the patriarchs, the people that made the wealth, are still around and evolved, it is a matter of, start introducing things like governance, which is basically coming up with a whole game plan of how you're going to run the family, right? So how often are we going to have family meetings? What's our purpose? What's our mission? You look at a family like the Rockefellers, they did a really good job of transcending that same belief system throughout, right? And then when do we bring in other younger members to come into discussions that we're going to have? And so you've really got to start there. And especially if you think about it, we talk from a real estate perspective. Well, let's say you had 300 million that came in and you have a 55-year-old who's, the second gen, and then you bring in a fourth gen who's 30. Well, if it's going to go into real estate, at 55 is probably going to be like, let's just buy some triple net, simple properties. We know we're going to get cash flow on. Well, that 30-year-old is, let's invest in the prop tech. Let's go into this technology and real estate. And there's obviously different risk perspective, right? And
Right.
so it's a matter of saying, let's pull back on the reins a little bit. But unless it's organized, it's very difficult for that to happen.
It's somehow it's perpetuated into common culture that you can't lose money in real estate. And that's absolutely false. You can lose money in real estate. There are things you can do that are significantly less risky. But if you're scratching your head thinking, oh my goodness, I just lost a ton of money in real estate, you probably did a really risky deal or with a really risky investment group that just wasn't seasoned already. They hadn't been through the cycles and seen the ups and downs and known what not to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think about, I've just heard so many times, we don't care about the returns. We want preservation first. Preserve the capital first. Preserve the capital first. If it's a 5% annualized return, great. We just don't want to lose our money, because I think at some point they had lost a significant amount of money. They were so gun shy that their kids weren't allowed to touch it, for generations until they met some kind of requirements. And it's just pretty interesting. It's a different world that most people they never see.
Well, I worked for a number of prominent families, and I was given three mandates each time. And it was, don't lose money, don't lose money, don't lose money, right? And when you look at the average return of a portfolio, it's actually 7%. So it's not it's not a huge number, but it's a safe number with a little bit of growth.
Yeah. You're ahead of inflation. You're not going down the tank. And real estate gives you a lot of tax offsets that probably boost that net 7% to a 10 or 12 or 15 after you net it all out.
Correct.
What do you think is going to be the biggest challenge going forward for firms like yourself? You've been in this game for a long time. You understand how to play the game, how to work, how to advise. You understand where people lose their money, where they preserve it. What do you think is going to be the biggest challenge moving forward?
Well, I'm going to answer that a couple different ways, because I also want to bring in the family component, which is going to be the biggest challenge, which is when you're looking at the future, you're starting to, and I'm sure you know this, you're starting to ask questions about what's going to be the social economic impact on a global basis. How is AI going to change what we're doing? Where do you put your money that might still be around in that type of business or what, right? So things are just changing so much that it's a bigger, it's asking, okay, how do we maximize what's available today, but then we don't get lost in it, I guess you could say. And I think that's the same thing for people in my business, which is, the one thing I will say is that face-to-face contact, talking to people, meeting with them, having lunch will always be the most important thing in my mind, because you can't replace that, right? It's helped by doing Zooms like this, but nothing replaces sitting down, chatting. So that's one thing. And then, where is it that there's still going to be opportunity? Because at some point, we talk about real estate and plumbers, electricians. Those are trades. Aren't going to go on lease in the short term.
No.
Building the homes, problem is we don't know how much things are truly advancing. Sometimes if we go on the internet, you can see these robots doing things that you're like, holy cow, I can't believe it.
Yeah.
But
for 2 minutes for a video.
Yeah. But I think it's a matter of we've made a decision to say, we're not going to get ahead of it with AI, but let's try to at least keep pace as much as we can. And I think that's probably the most important thing, because it's just, as you know, it just moves so fast.
It moves so fast. And we've created so many inventions around AI. We've really leaned forward. So we feel like we're really ahead. And then the next day it's like, oh, that gap it's already closing faster than we can create. And even though we've got, 400 and something of these inventions, in line. It's just like, man, we can't even create. But what we did was which I'll bring back to family offices in a second, but we built our whole company around how do you make a positive social impact in the world, because AI is changing so fast. There needs to be people focused on creating a positive impact in the world and doing it in a very profitable way so that we can generate revenue and make it as sustainable as possible. We can't get there if we're all just focused on making a profit first. Mm-hmm. And you look at OpenAI, they're getting punished now because they focused on profit first, and Anthropic had at least some element of safety in there. And then ultimately their product is just better. At least that's where it is today. Who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? I just saw OpenAI came out with 5.4. So they literally released a new one today. It happens all the time, but for us to keep up, it's hard. I'm in this 20 hours a day, 15, 18 hours a day, working, pushing, leading, doing this as best as we possibly can. What's interesting is when we got to pitch to venture capital firms, like, oh, we just want to sell it in 2 years or 3 years. What's the ROI on that? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, what's this social element? That doesn't make sense. Does that hurt? Does it make returns concessionaries? But family offices, on the other hand, are like, this is a long-term deal. We want to hold on to this. We want to be part of the future. We want to make a difference in the world. We've already made tons and tons of money. We want to make a difference.
Well, it's also patient capital, right? They don't have to say we got to sell by the 6th year because the fund's over the 7th year. It's more like, if we've got to sit through this, then we're going to sit through it, because that's, this money we're allocating for this specific purpose.
Right. They can actually invest with a mission, not just for the return. And so that's where we've gotten all our traction is with family offices. And it's been a totally different environment to sit down face to face, like you said, and have a wonderful conversation with people.
I mean, the biggest thing I think is that there are a lot of families and foundations that they think about, okay, we're going to give X amount of money toward it. But I don't think they really think, okay, how can we get that money to actually create a return so that we can continue to give on that initial investment? I think a lot of times it's like, okay, I'm going to write a check for X amount. I'm not going to see it again. I'm done.
Yeah.
Rather than thinking of, okay, well, what can we do to maximize what we're doing? And, but when you tie it back into same thing as growing a business, which is probably where they created their wealth in some type of business. It's like, look, you had to make money to build, right? Well, that's exactly what we do. We
got to do it. Have to. DJ, right. It's been fantastic having you on the show today. For folks who are in that space, they're thinking about that space, how can they reach out and find you?
The easiest way would probably be, DJ at Evergreen Property Partners is one. They can also go to just my name, djvankeuren.com, and they can get me there. If you Google my name, I'll come up, and can reach out to me, or even on LinkedIn. But anything I can do to be of help in any manner, I'm happy to do so.
Well, I know we could talk for hours. Thank you so much for being on the show, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, Sam.
If this episode shifted your thinking, then share it with someone bold. And remember, capital is a tool. Use it to build a world you are proud to live in.